And right, running back C.J. Anderson signed an offer sheet with the Dolphins, and the Broncos have 5 days to match that. Denver has now lost Brock Osweiler, defensive end Malik Jackson, and linebacker Danny Trevathan in just this week alone. Jackson had this to say to USA Today Sports. "I'd love to be a fly on the wall in Mr. Elway's office right now," referring to GM John Elway. "I mean, just think about it. Brock, me, Danny, Louie, they must have a master plan. Everybody's going, what the heck? He's got a plan. I'd just like to be a fly on the wall to hear it." We are a Disney-friendly show. So the question that we pose, where do the Broncos go from here? Freddie, do you have an answer?
They'll be fine. Here's why. Here's why they'll be fine. John Elway is not stupid. He isn't. I guarantee you the Denver Broncos have a plan in place because you can't keep everybody on this roster. He made a choice. Okay, am I going to lose Malik Jackson or am I going to lose Von Miller? I'm not losing Von Miller. Danny Trevathan was really good for this team. I think he's a great addition for the Chicago Bears. Mark my words, he has somebody on standby that's going to be a part of this. I'm going to trust him implicitly that you don't want to lose guys, but you know you can't keep everybody. John Elway knows that better than anybody else. I'm sure he has a backup plan for losing Brock Osweiler. It's not going to be visible to us because that's not how he gets down. People wondered, okay, what are they going to do after they got blasted by the Seattle Seahawks? How did that work out 2 years later? He said, I'm not going to let that man, Peyton Manning, go through what I went through until the end of my career. I'm going to make sure he has a running game. I'm going to make sure he has a defense. And he went out there and he got DeMarcus Ware. He turned Von Miller around, who was having knuckleheaded issues off the football field. He brings in T.J. Ward. He brings in Akeem Talib. He brings in a running game to help out Peyton Manning, that if something happened, if Peyton Manning couldn't do it anymore, he had enough pieces in place. If he did that for Peyton Manning, you think he's just going to forget about it now? Now that Peyton Manning, these guys aren't there? Whatever the master plan is, the John Elway master plan is going to work to keep Denver afloat and keep them in a championship contending status. It's going to hurt. You can't lose players like that and think it's not going to affect you. Other teams, I worry about that affecting. There's certain teams now that when they have losses, they'll be fine. The Patriots in that category, the Packers in that category, the Steelers in that category. Without question, now with John Elway in charge, the Denver Broncos are in that category. Mark my words, they're going to be a lot better. They're going to be fine, more fine than anybody can anticipate.
Wow, that is a lot of faith in John Elway.
It is. I readily admit that.
You said John Elway's not stupid, and I would never say that he is, but let me tell you something.
But you're about to, aren't you?
No.
I'm saying it in a different way.
I'm going to tell you the smart people can be wrong.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
I'm going to tell you, smart people can have plans explode on them.
That's fair. I don't think it will.
Smart people sometimes eat crow. I don't know. I could be talking about people I know.
Are you talking about yourself?
In that case, call
John
911
Elway's,
now.
I'm sure, a smart guy. This cannot have been the plan, and I don't see the backup plan. He's not sitting somewhere right now, Freddie, with a master sheet going, okay, well, X, Y, Z happened. Here's our next place on the alphabet to go ABC. Now, granted, I'll tell you this. One of the things that happens to Super Bowl champions is mediocre or just good players sometimes get paid great player level. We're both Dallas Cowboy fans. I mean, that's the story of the Dallas Cowboys in the 1990s.
You ain't lying.
Every year they won a Super Bowl. And as soon as free agency came in, middling good, but not great linebackers. Robert Smith, Ken Norton even, went off and got paid like great players to the 49ers, to the Rams. It happened over and over. And that's just something that happens to Super Bowl champion teams. Everybody overvalues their players immediately. Again, it's not that they're not good players. They just get paid like great players. So that being said, though, the last time I think a team lost this many players, you'd have to go back to the Baltimore Ravens when they won with Joe Flacco as their quarterback. They lost 8 starters that year from that Super Bowl team. And as we talked about the other day, they haven't been back to the playoffs since that time.
One time.
One time, and you said
lost to the Patriots.
Playoff loss, excuse me. So one playoff return since that time. But here's the real key. Turning through all those players, all those starters, that's somewhat to be expected. Perhaps John Elway could have anticipated that, but he couldn't anticipate his quarterback situation. And the last time you had a quarterback, a Super Bowl winning team, lose their starting quarterback and the next year start somebody who wasn't even on their roster was also the Ravens. But this time you got to go back to 2000. And it was ESPN's own Trent Dilfer being gone from the Ravens and then replacing him with Kansas City's Elvis Gerbach. It just doesn't happen. And I can't imagine John Elway saw this in the cards. And if he had a backup plan, I'd sure like to know. I'm sure a lot of Broncos fans would like to know, what is it today? Is it Colin Kaepernick? Because that isn't a continuously championship contending team in my mind. Neither is RG3, neither is Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Kate?
I don't know if you wanted to respond to that. But
No, I'll respond real quick and say, you know, guys that know how to build organizations, you always prepare for any eventuality that's going to happen, even if something comes out of left field that you could not have anticipated. Yeah, he didn't anticipate, no one anticipated that Brock Osweiler would get turned sideways because he got benched in the regular season in the second half of that final regular season game and go to the Houston Texans. But John Elway is like, well, he helped us, but he didn't win the Super Bowl for us. We can find somebody, and I trust my coaching staff, that this is the same guy that fired John Fox after 4 years and 40-plus wins. And people say, what are you doing? Running Gary Kubiak. That worked out pretty well. I got a pretty good idea that John Elway knows what he's doing, that he'll figure out something and make that work in Denver.
Well, you mentioned the 2012 Ravens, right? I think why the comparison here is a little bit different is that year it was like they were maxed out to win the Super Bowl with a lot of aging guys as well. You had some retirements on the defensive end, and it was a matriculation of sorts that the Ravens had aged out. I don't think that's the case here with Denver because of the layers of players they have beneath the guys that have left. I mean, there is just depth on both sides of the ball that I don't think the Baltimore Ravens had that year. Therefore, there's a replenishment possibility that the Denver Broncos have in place that I don't think Baltimore had at that time. So when you talk about guys that will replace guys who left in free agency, they have a lot of young guys who can step into those roles. The one place that I think, as you mentioned, is the big question mark where I don't think there's any way John Elway predicted that this would happen is at the quarterback spot. I don't think there is a chance that he's like, okay, if Peyton retires and then Brock goes away, I definitely am signing this guy. So I think that there is right now, that open hole where we're like, before I can predict how good I think Denver's going to be next year, I need to see who they bring in. But at the same time, it didn't matter who they had last year at quarterback. And I think that their defense was on an unbelievable level that we can't anticipate again. I mean, even if they had kept everybody on that defense, I would have to account for some regression because of the way they played in the playoffs.
You don't think it mattered who they had at quarterback? They were going to win the Super Bowl regardless? Yes.
I think if you gave them an average quarterback last year the whole time, as opposed to Osweiler and Peyton Manning, and you just gave them an average NFL quarterback, I think they would have won the Super Bowl last year. And I think if you look at it statistically, considering that Peyton was statistically an all-time poor season at quarterback, I think it holds up that the Denver Broncos could have won the Super Bowl last year with a mediocre NFL quarterback.
Especially the way they play defense.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think there are things beyond statistics in playing quarterback, and when you're dealing with an 18-year veteran who puts himself in the top 5 of NFL quarterbacks, he's bringing things to your team that an average NFL quarterback doesn't provide you. And by the way, the Broncos are beyond the point of bidding on average NFL quarterbacks. I mean, they're all of a sudden finding themselves from having a Hall of Famer down to the pickings are pretty slim.
Okay, but Brock Osweiler went in under center, and he won at quarterback. So it's not just
we'll see if he's
that
average.
Yeah, we don't know yet. It's not just that there's evidence that they could win with a mediocre quarterback. Oh, and Peyton brings intangibles. Well, there's evidence that another quarterback stepped in and still won when paired with that defense.
So listen, the Broncos, they have a QB situation.
It's a situation.
It's a quandary now.
It's a fluid situation.
Trevor Siemian, I'm with you, bud.
Cowboys
Poor
fans.
Trevor.
Cowboys quarterback situation has been in question for a while now. So how should they go about finding the next Tony Romo?